OPEXers, welcome back to your podcast. On today's show, I talk with Coach Dan John. On this episode, Dan and I discuss the aging athlete. Guys, this was a great conversation with Dan, and I hope you really enjoyed the show. Coach Handsome, that's your name for today, Dan.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. Hello.
Dan, thanks a million for making time. I really appreciate it. It's always great to get a chance to sit down and talk to you, whether it's in person, you know, in your bedroom like last year when we were over at Mary's drinking your Guinness, or whether it's online or on a medium like this. But listen, it's brilliant to talk to you. Great to catch up. And I suppose for the listeners, what is new in your world at the moment?
Well, I don't know what new would be. I have a book that came out, 40 Years with a Whistle. I'm very happy. I'm very proud of the book. It's basically in 3 parts. It's my 10 commandments for coaching. And commandment number 10 is to remember your mentors. So basically, I walk you through every coach I ever worked with, really. I mean, most every coach, you know. I mean, there's some that don't make it because it just be like a weekend or, you know. But in hindsight, I should have actually put some of that down too. But and then the last part is what I think today. I had a total hip replacement in December 18th. And so both legs are now titanium. And for the first time since probably 2008, when I flipped a caber after stepping in a hole, I feel pretty good again. Yeah. And working on another book and just traveling a ton, doing lots of workshops. Yeah.
You're what we call a machine. That's what we say in Ireland.
A machine, yeah.
Well, you have the metal in your hips, you know, so you're kind of half human, half machine.
Half there, yeah. Here we go, yeah.
So I really wanted to get you on because I'll tell you why. You're one of my lecturers in Mary's, and I don't be on social media too much, but I was on Twitter one day and I seen this picture of Dan John at Mary's this summer, and I was like, holy bananas, Dan looks in incredible shape. Now, not that you're never not in shape, but I meant like lean, and I just said it to you before I hopped online there as well. So I sent you an email saying, listen, love to catch up, and I said, by the way, you look really, really lean, like. And in my head, I knew you'd got the hip operation. And I remember after your first hip operation, you said to me in one of our very first conversations, you're like, yeah, it's amazing what happens when cortisol leaves your body. You know, you're like, I finally can sleep now and recover after you got your first hip done because you were saying you're feeling so much better. So in my mind, I'd assumed that the second hip had really helped out as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I really wanted to get you on because I felt there's probably no one better right now to discuss the aging athlete, is what I kind of titled this podcast, or if you want to call it the elder athlete. But like, I'm 32 now, and like, as I said to you just before I hopped online, like, I know myself now, I'm starting to think about like longevity of my body and my joints. It's like, do I really need to be squatting like heavy 2 or 3 times a week, or pulling heavy? And it's kind of like, it's such a cliche. I can remember Boyle, I can remember like Mike Boyle, I can remember so many, you know, other people tell me, they're like, you'll see, we'll be right. And then you are, you know, your early 20s going, I'm indestructible. And it's kind of like your late 20s, like, I'm getting a little bit stiff. Then your early 30s, like, yeah, now I'm starting to feel a bit of pain somewhere. And then like your late 30s, now not in late 30s yet, but then you're like, yeah, I should have listened to those guys when I was in my early 20s. But so I'm going to hand it over to you now. So just the aging athlete, kind of things I want you to touch on are like, I know you're a big fan of hypertrophy as you get older, hold on to muscle, big fan of joint mobility, nutritional considerations, lifestyle considerations, stress management, everything. You can throw everything in the pot there. So it's just over to you, and then I'll come up with questions as long as you.
Just keep anything I forget, remind me. You know, the hardest thing, in my experience, one of the things that'll shock most people is that at age 21 or 22, you are now an aging athlete. If you're not professional by 21 or 22 or sniffing elite status, it's over. I mean, it sounds horrible, but it's true, you know. Now, you can join these new sports. For example, like CrossFit is a new sport. You can just get involved in CrossFit because there's no real history to CrossFit. Or you can do like when windsurfing first showed up, you know. You could do, I'm not making fun of these. I'm just saying, you know, if you, I don't know if it's still even a sport, but inline rollerblading went, about 25 years ago here in the States was the thing to do. I mean, every weekend at the airport, they had these massive, inline rollerboarding, inline skating races. Well, I mean, if you showed up you learned how to inline at 31, 32, took it seriously, yeah, you could be one of the best in Utah at 35. But established sports that have been around, sports that have a history, sports that have, like in my case, the discus is mentioned in the Bible. Ulysses is in a discus throwing contest in the Odyssey. There's a chance in the discus throw that we've been there, seen it. If you're not good at 21, 22, you're probably not going to be good. So one of the first things I want to do is this caveat is that if you're older than 21 or 22, you are an aging athlete. And I hate to say this, but the water is already under the bridge at age 21. So if you haven't established, for example, I don't know what sport, it doesn't matter your sport, but if your sport requires that you know the Olympic lifts and the power lifts, you had better hit those big numbers at age 18, 19, 20, 21, so that you can just use muscle memory and bounce the rest of your career to get back to those heavy loads with literally every year less and less and less work. Do you want pounds or kilos?
It doesn't matter either, or probably pounds, because the majority of listeners are going to be American, North American. But people nowadays they listen to podcasts from all over the world, so people can make the
Okay. So late in my career, I mean, it took me years to get my bench up to 405 pounds. That's 4 big plates on both sides. So that's better. As an American, that might mean, well, that means more to me than 400. Okay. Because with 400, you'd have to go 3 45s, a 35, a 10, a 5, and a 2. And I'm not doing that. So it took me a long time in my career to get up to 405 in the bench. But as my career went on and on and on, I got to the point that I could not bench for 6, 7, 8 months at a time and come back in within 2-3 workouts and get my bench back up to 405. And that's one of the, I think, secrets to being an aging athlete, is that you have to understand that certain things have to be set. The things that have to be set, you need excellent techniques. So as an aging athlete, you need the most biomechanically correct technique you have that does the least amount of damage per throw, per kick, per strike, for every rep. It's interesting because when you talk to javelin throwers, they always get hurt on bad throws. They never get hurt on a good throw because everything is in the right place. So you have to really have a standard of beautiful, masterful technique in whatever your sport is. The next thing you have to have is you have to have well, traditionally in the military, we break them down into 3 parts, and we'll do that now. Grand strategy is like what the Americans had in World War II. We had a whole bunch of factories that were so far inland that the Japanese and Germans could never really hit that stuff, okay? Here in Utah, we had several steel plants, and actually we still have a very large air base here down in Las Vegas, massive. Well, there's no way they could ever get there. So grand strategy is when you step back and you buy all the tools and all the equipment and learn all the things. And you have the refrigerator here, you have the refrigerator in your weight room, your car has certain pieces of equipment that you drive to the workout in. That's grand strategy, okay? That's the toolkits, the equipment, the knowledge, the stuff. And then there's strategy. And now as an aging athlete, part of your strategy is to try to hang around long enough so you can slide up into an older age group. So strategy is that is taking it, is the next step lower. That'd be more of the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year approach. And then of course, tactics is what you do on Saturday morning at competition. So what you need to do as an aging athlete is first make sure you know your techniques. Then make sure you have the equipment. By the way, aging athletes tend to have more money anyway. In my wallet here, I have this card that's platinum, and I can buy a house with it. Well, if a better discus comes along, I'm going to buy a better discus because I have the wallet to do it with. The other thing, too, aging athletes tend to have a little bit more of is passion. And passion comes from the Latin to suffer. It doesn't mean to love. It means to suffer. So aging athletes generally don't mind suffering as much. Now, suffering isn't just painful workouts. It's also being away from the family, taking that 8 to 26 hour plane flight. It's taking that train. It's taking that Uber. It's being in a crappy motel the night before the championships. It's eating a sandwich because there's no place else open except for those, those little sandwiches they have in England, those little sandwiches, those watercress sandwiches. Living on watercress, oh boy, I tell you, that's when you know you're an athlete. And then from there is tactics. And so the equipment, the money, the stuff, the vision of where you want to be a year from now. And then when you show up on Saturday morning, understanding that, well, I'm 62 now. So at 62, my approach has to be radically different than it was when I was 42, 52, 42, 32, 22. I used to be able to roll out of bed and just kick ass. Well, now I use Under Armour. I bring Under Armour's performance sleepwear. So I sleep in magic underwear, okay? And maybe I'll bring an eye mask and earplugs, or I'll listen to Brain.fm's sleep tape to knock out the hotel noises. On the tactical side, so much of tactics as an aging athlete isn't I'm going to show up and my opening throw. No, I'm going to show up and make sure my room, I make sure I have extra water in my room, extra snacks in my room, make sure all my gear is lined up. That's a tactic at age 62 that at age 22, you'd be like, I don't need sleep. I got a hot girlfriend. I go a couple nights a week without sleep. At 62, you can't do that anymore. So that would be the big framework first. Okay, Robbie, that would be the post 22 vision. So it's going to be, I hate to say it, it's going to be money, it's going to be passion, and it's going to be using your brain more than your body. When it comes to the world of training, one of the hardest things to learn is that after about, I think it's age 35, the body just struggles with lean body mass. Now, part of it is what we talked about earlier with, all those nagging little injuries you had your whole life now start to add up into maybe even surgeries and the cortisol and the inflammations. But lean body mass itself begins to show its issues after about age 35. And that's why we should actually flip the way we train. Most people come in the weightlifting, they bodybuild, and then they power lift until they find out they're not good enough. Then they try Olympic lifting. The truth is, you probably should Olympic lift as a teenager, power lift, and then bodybuild. And bodybuild is what many adult athletes need more of than anything else. And it's not so much to build muscles that look good in the mirror. It's to get that hormonal cascade. It's to, and it is a good idea to train probably in the weight room 3 days a week, probably. It is probably a good idea to do total reps in the 15 to 25 range. So 3 sets of 8, 5 sets of 5, 5 sets of 3. The big movers, push, pull, hinge, squat, do loaded carries, of course, and just kind of get in and get the body to make a transformation, to get the body to what Rob Wolf calls a hormonal cascade, to get the body trying to have an adaptation, and then stop. Because after age 35, you get the adaptation, and that's good enough. You got hands off. For there, you really got to focus on things like quality sleep. Water becomes a bigger and bigger issue as you age. I like what Tony Robbins says about life. He says that you want to keep the juiciness of life. And really what you'll notice is that people tend to dry out before your eyes. Now, you certainly see it in their skin, and you certainly see it in their in the wrinkles and things like that, as you're looking at me with my wrinkles and dry skin. So when we talk about getting juicy again, it is sexually, it's a term sexually. You want to be juicy again, you want to be able to have an active sex life. You want to have an active social life. And I hate to say it, but is hydration a factor in all of this? And I think it is. The hard one, and this would be the other area, is on nutrition. And this is the tough one. Does the metabolism slow down with age? Well, I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever done, a research study on it and said, yes, it slows down 26.2% or whatever. But there is no question that fat tends to it doesn't replace muscle. But let's use, instead of replace, displace. Fat displaces muscle generally in the limb. So your guns might be the same size, but the percentage of fat is higher in your arms, legs. So as you age, I think you have to make some dietary changes. You can't get away with eating what we call them donuts and cookies, soft drinks. You just can't. Useless carbohydrates become more and more difficult. Is my metabolism slowing down at age 62? Well, I'm thinking so of this, but I also notice I sit down a lot more than I used to do. I tend to lay around a little bit more. I like to be comfortable more than I used to. So it could be a chicken or the egg thing. Is my body slowing down, or am I just slowing down? Because at 62, you feel like you earned it. It doesn't matter either way, but you can no longer be consuming mega amounts of simple sugars and get away with it. There's no question in my mind that fasting has to become part of the aging athlete's protocols. I do what's called the fast mimicking diet. That's that Dr. Walter Longo's 5-day, where basically you get about 200 calories a day from olives, which is a lot of olives, man. That's 50 olives. And then about 200 calories a day, I use almonds. So that's about 30 to 40 almonds. And then I just eat vegetable soup for about 5 days. And the reason I do that is I'm trying to get my body to do this thing called, it depends on where you are, either autophagy or autophagy, which is when the body consumes it takes its own proteins, takes them out of, cells gone bad and, repurposes them. Do I think everything I just said is true? At some level, it certainly seems to be true in my experience and the experience of others. Intermittent fasting is something most adults do without even thinking about it. My parents' generation intermittent fasted because they grew up in the Depression in this little event called World War II. And so for them, food was not something you ate 6 times a day. Food was something you might get twice a day. When you look at pictures of my mom and dad and their friends, there are no fat Americans, not a single one. And ever since the United States got involved at a government level in nutrition, we've gotten very fat. Now, there's correlation or causation, I don't care. But, so at some level, you need to fast. There's nothing new about that. In the great religious traditions, first the fast, then the feast. To explain all moral theology, that's what I always tell people. First the fast, then the feast. The other issue, of course, the need for sleep becomes more and more important as you age, and yet the ability to stay asleep becomes more and more difficult. So it is kind of funny. Everything is kind of bass-ackwards in this aging process. You need less of some things and more of others, and yet your body wants more of this and less than that. People my age love certain kinds of things. I call it beige food. They love beige food. You call them chips, we call them fries and chicken nuggets and Cheerios and grain cereal and toast. And by God, it's the worst stuff you can probably put in your belly after a certain age. The need for sleep is so obvious in the hormone repair And yet many people my age will want to stay up for 2 more episodes of whatever TV show's on now. And just, and they're going to miss the juiciness of life. Okay, so there's the introduction.
Yeah, really good. Just I have a few questions regarding training, nutrition, and we'll also touch a little maybe on, sort of mobility needs. With training, Bill Hartman made a good point. Now, Bill is just gone past 50, and he kind of made a statement that he feels that in terms of like outputs in training, like intensity, he's like, I still feel like I can still put out the same output I can when I was in my 20s and 30s, but he's like, it's the recovery from it that I don't have. He's like, when I was 20, he's like, I could crush a session on a Monday and be bounced back then and be there Wednesday crushing again. But he's like, if I did that Monday session now, he's like, I won't be able to do that again for at least 5-6 days. Maybe you can only touch on it once a week, but so to him, he's like, the ability to output intensity, that can stay around a lot longer than we think, but he's like, it's the recoverability from it. So just from a recoverability standpoint, Dan, what would your thoughts be on that? And then maybe too with training volume, I listened to a podcast recently with James Fitzgerald, and he kind of was talking about the aging athlete, and he was saying, when you're younger, you might be able to hit consecutive, just using a weightlifting example, you might be able to hit consecutive sets at a heavy load. Like if you're doing sets of 5, you might be able to hit sets across. But he's like, for an aging athlete, it's probably better to ramp up, hit one top set, and then just back it off then, or leave it at that.
Actually, I think that's true even for the youth, but we always tend to. But then I look at some of the workouts these people do, and they're talking about crushing it, and then you look at the load on there for 5, and it's like, you're still mentally a bodybuilder. You're doing a 315 bench press for 5 sets of 5, which is great. Well, 5 sets, as a lifter, that should be 365. I mean, the loads are always so suspect. We still have that bodybuilding mentality. Okay, let's wash that away. Mm-hmm. When I was coming up as an Olympic lifter, I could clean and jerk 3 days a week. 3 days a week, I could clean and jerk. If there was a contest, very often the day before a contest, Dick would have me come in, and by God, he would have me go up to my openers, which still shocks me that I could do that. So 4 days a week, I would clean and jerk. Late in my career, when I was lifting literally 100 pounds more in the clean and jerk, the only time I could clean and jerk was at contests. I could clean in training, I could jerk in training, but I could only clean and jerk in contests because I couldn't recover. But it was also it was load reasons. It was aging. I was 47. I was at my best lifting in my life. My PRs are at age 34 in the weight room, but I was still at 47. I was still a factor. Yeah. The part of the reason you don't have the recoveries is because this is a hard thing to throw your arms around, but if you think that a 315 bench is a lot, and you're doing 275 for sets of 5, that, God bless you, there's nothing wrong with that. But as you get stronger and stronger and stronger, and you get your bench up to mid 400s, and you do 385 for 5, that 110 pounds more, it's night and day. So one of the problems with being an aging athlete is you have this base that's so massive that you're so much stronger than you think you are. So there's often your loads will be so much higher than they were as a youth. That's the one nice thing. I've kept journals since 1970, so I can look at my workouts from the 1990s and say, yeah, the reason I couldn't recover like I did in the 70s is because the weight on the barbell was 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 pounds more than it was back then. Now, I was working hard back in 77, very hard, but I wasn't yet. I was clean and jerking 330, 341. A couple of years later, it's 363, 385. That jump makes recovery harder and harder and harder. That's why I like the work of Marty Gallagher so much. He has you do a 12-week buildup, boom, boom, week in. Every week you're expected, if it's a set of 8 in the squat, you got to make that set of 8. Next week we're adding 10 pounds. You got to make that set of 8. Then we add 10 more pounds, and you got to make a set of 5. 10 more pounds, you got to make a set of 5. 10 more pounds, you're going to make that set of 3, 10 more pounds instead of 2, you know, and you just have to make, but after that weightlifting meet, the following Monday, you don't come back to the gym. You focus on clean eating, going for long walks, getting yourself feeling good again, making sure your joints feel good again, your elbows, your wrists, joint mobility, long walks. So yes, that is correct. That is correct about recovery. But I would love it if we could get people to train intelligently at 17 to understand that true recovery, what they think they're recovering from at 7. It's like when people do bodybuilding workouts. I got a good pump. And the next day they come back in the gym, they can almost repeat it again. Well, it's because of bodybuilding workout. The nervous system was barely taxed in a bodybuilding workout. I share with you guys the information from Charlie Francis about, if you run a maximal sprint, and we're talking about a 9.8, 9.9, 10 flat, 100 meters. We're not going to get 17 flat, Irish kid running it, okay? Sorry, a little cheap shot on my. We're talking about a real top-end sprint. Charlie was very clear. You can't just recover from that. You can't just go, okay, you got 2 minutes, we'll do it again. When I was at my peak and cleaning up to every workout, I'd clean up to at least 363, 165 kilos, every workout. I would take a whole week. I would clean only once a week because to recover from 363 isn't like recovering from 265, 120 kilos. It's a huge leap. So that's one thing to think of. And I'd love it if we could talk to people in their youth about what true recovery is. Recovering from heavy deadlifts and heavy sprints is radically different than recovering from skull crushers and reverse curls. One of the nice things what's happened in the last 35 years or so is that Masters Olympic lifting has been around long enough now so that we have a body of knowledge from these guys. And the number one thing we learned from, and this is actually probably good advice for any Olympic lifter, any thrower, is the only time you go for maximum is when you have 3 officials and you're on the platform. That's the rest of the time is training. Now it's funny because that's also the tradition that was true in the pre-steroid era. Tommy Kono famously said I asked him about it, so he told and I got it reaffirmed. He believed that an Olympic lifter should lift at about 8 to 10 meets a year. Now, he didn't say world championships or anything. His idea was that's where you practice the sport. And then the rest of the time, you made quality lifts and you look good. He also believed you never miss in training, ever. And so there's things around floating out there, Robbie, that we've forgotten about. And what killed us as in our profession and in most sports was the anabolic steroid age. And people cheated with all these ways to get around traditional recovery. And now here we are in 2019. The genie's been out of the bottle since 1960, 1956. Now, in my entire life, basically, the anabolic has been the anabolic steroid age. And now people are trying to come back to doing things drug-free without any information about how to do it, because most people refuse to read the materials from the 50s and early 60s. And of course, I impress it on you guys as students all the time. I ask you to read Heidegger's Physiology of Strength, DeLorme's work, and yet getting you guys to read that stuff is the most difficult because it's not very sexy, but it's pre-anabolic. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know now. This wasn't pre-anabolic, but even though in Zasiorski and Kramer's Science, Practice, and Strength Training, and in one of Meffier's books, they talk about the Soviet weightlifters, and they were saying like the highest qualification weightlifters, they spend way less time, over 90%, compared to the lesser qualified lifters. So like the most advanced lifters, they spend the majority of their training between 75 and 85%, and they also spent the least amount of time, over 9%, like the most qualified. Like, so they spent most of their time more technical ranges for their lifts, and then they only obviously went to max coming up towards competition. That was the Soviet lifters. Now the Bulgarians obviously were more going balls to the walls all the time.
Well, I had a friend watch the Bulgarians for about 6 months, and he said it's a lot different than what they report. But
yeah,
the Cubans years ago decided to never go. They focused on 80% for singles, and they tried to get their load done with squats and pulls.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that is that, well, it's the exact same idea. Robbie, at St. Mary's, we ask you guys to lift in that weightlifting meet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of students don't do it, especially the students who want to be bodybuilders. In fact, that day that you can't even find them, right? Right? They absolutely. Am I lying?
No, they're gone. They're too embarrassed. They can't get into the catch position.
Well, it's not just the catch position, but here's the thing: they will never learn the fundamental truth that we're talking about. You know, getting a burn on a leg extension. I'm not ripping on it. I'm just saying, doing a set of 15 on a leg extension is nothing like a maximal snatch. And what's your best snatch, Robbie?
Oh, I don't snatch that. More of a clean. My best clean and jerk is 90 kilo at about 80 kilo body weight, but my snatch never, because I'm too gangly.
If I was to put you in front of a crowd of classmates, about 50 or 60 people, 3 officials being filmed, and you've got a 1-minute timer after we mention your name to make the lift, and you're in a clean and you're attempting 92K, what's going on?
The adrenaline.
How much more stress do you got?
Yeah.
It's not like getting one more rep with the leg extension. So yeah, everybody who's ever lifted weights knows that everything I just said is true. Mm. But what happens is me and about 10 other people are going, no, try this instead. And of course, the muscle magazines and all the supplement companies are saying, oh, that's bullshit. You know, you need to take creatine before you lift. That'll really put a pump on your arm. That'll make the discus go farther. Is a spoonful of this? Well, no, it's not. So that's an uphill battle we face. So what I'm trying to say is that if you want to talk about recovery, you got to pull out Tommy Kono's book, Weightlifting Olympic Style. You got to go back to Heidegger's book, The Physiology of Strength, the Lorm's book. Look at what those guys are saying and saying, holy cow, I'm not doing anything like these guys are doing. I'm doing this thing I read in a magazine. Oh, by the way, many of my friends, Robbie, write for the magazines, okay? And guess what they tell me? Yeah. It's all made up. They make up the workouts to fit the photos. So it's all BS. Yeah. And yet people believe it like it's I was going to say gospel, but they believe it like it's that water is made out of hydrogen and oxygen. They believe it like it's science, and it's not. It's all gibberish. It's all rubbish. So when these guys talk about how when you hit a certain age, things change, my argument is things don't change. Your perception of things change. I tell you one thing, at 62, I can still put in a really good workout. Have you seen me press?
Not lately, not since, well, I mean, I've seen you lift a few times over Mary's and I was always fairly impressed.
Right. I mean, I can still press huge loads. What I can't do is 10 sets of 10 with a 20 kilo bell.
Yeah.
But boy, so it's kind of how you want to look at things. So we're at an X right here. We're at an X right here. I am telling you as an aging athlete, you need to do more hypertrophy work. But I'm also telling you, when it does come time to get strong in the weight room, you got to get strong in the weight room. Okay? And you only show off at competitions. So there's these conflicting concepts that you have to hold in your head, which means this. You probably want to have about an 8-week block of hypertrophy and pure joint mobility. Then you probably want to have depending on what you got, a 4 to 8 week block on just building strength, and then some kind of test. Now there's your off season for you. 2 months of hypertrophy, 2 months of strength, an early test. After that, you have to make a decision. Do I need more strength? Do I need more of this? Do I need more of that? But after that early test, you then can figure out what needs to happen. Yeah. And most of the time, the early test is often, at least in my world, the best mark you'll have all year, because if you've got a big engine and you're really strong, good things tend to happen. That's not the most scientific thing I've said in my life. But okay, good. Enough on that. Let's move on.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of a conversation I had with Pat Davidson. You know, there's that paradox of like the more advanced a trainee gets, the more training volume they need to keep progressing. And like, but at the same time, the fact that they're getting stronger their outputs are greater, they cause more like homeostatic disruptions in their body. So therefore, their recovery gets longer. So therefore, it's like, well, how do they get more training volume to help recover longer? And then Pat made a good point. He's like, it's not that it's not that their total training volume goes up over their career. It's their specific training volume goes up, but their general training volume goes down. So obviously, when you're a novice, you'll do more GPP versus SPP, and then as you get more advanced in that lead, your SPP goes up while your GPP doesn't completely go, but it's way less more important. It goes down. So he's like, their specific training volume goes up, but their overall training volume actually goes down a little bit because the intensities of their specific training is so high, and that's how they're getting the training stimulus in, and also the more recovery. And also that's when you also see like you athletes will train like, 4 times a week, 5 times a week. Then like obviously when you get to elite, they were training 2, 3 times a day to get the training volume and also to separate out the loads for recovery too. So that was a good point he made too. He was like, your specific training volume will increase over your career, but your total training volume will either stay kind of the same or decrease a little bit because your GPP has gone down. So
I would say decrease. Here's the problem though, Robbie, is that
decrease,
every single person listening thinks that jogging and circuit training and burpees is the secret to elite performance. Because that's what makes you sweat. It's what makes you sweat.
Yeah.
And I mean, and if it is true, all the things you said, and I don't know if it is true. I mean, I remember the one thing is when you've put the reps in, this is what we've learned in track and field, at least in my world. If you've put the reps in over time, pretty soon you hit a place where, some very great throwers in history have only taken 6 to 8 throws in training. Because when you're dropping throws that are all around the world record, that hit on your nervous system you just can't keep going. And so this is the $1 million question. My point is this: most athletes, when shit comes down, when they're starting to have poor performances, their response is always, I'm going to get myself in better shape. And what that means is more, I'm going to do CrossFit, I'm going to do jogging, I'm going to go do Orange Theory, I'm going to go do insanity workout, because that I will punish myself into elite performance. And the truth is, if you are screwing up, it has probably almost nothing to do with your body. It's got everything to do with everything above your neck.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah, that's kind of a default mode for everyone is to think, and again, it's, as you kind of said, it's a false perception, because if I sweated, therefore I worked harder, and it's just like, you could have the whole conversation of transfer training. But going back to Pat Davidson's point, I thought that was a very good point, because that was always the paradox I had in my mind. It's like, well, if you're getting more elite, how can you get more training volume in if you're causing more homeostatic disruption? And he was like, specific volume will go up, but your total training volume actually does go down because your GPP is going down.
I've talked to these. Obviously, you got to be careful what they tell you and what I read. But there's been some amazing athletes in world history who have gone all the way down to 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a believer in minimalism if you have the foundation to do it. And in fact, in a lot of people's careers, by finally easing up on all the junk and just focusing on the quality, they get a new career. That's what happened to me in my 40s.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what Pat's saying. He's like, their specific training volume goes up, but their total training volume actually goes down. Because again, so that was the similar to Greg Rutherford with Dan Pfaff. Like Dan was like, Greg could only take like real good hits to his nervous system once every 7 to 10 days. And he's like, you tell a coach that he's not doing anything hard for 10 days, he's like, you're out of your mind. He's like, it's all he can handle. That's all he needed to, So, just moving on to nutrition again and just digestion. A really good point James Fitzgerald made is like, as you get older too, like people only think, oh, my joints and my skeletal muscles are getting older, but he's like, your digestive system is also getting older. Like, so he's like, you compare at 62, so you're 62, I'm 32, you've had 30 more years of food going through your digestive tract. You've had like thousands of more bowel movements. So he's like, your digestive system is older. So in terms of the food now, in terms of the amount and the quality and the types, how has that changed, or how does that change over an aging athlete's career? Because the other diet, so just for I let you understand, because the other, you kind of mentioned this, the other catch-22 is that while, like, as we get older, we need more protein, but our ability to assimilate, to digest it and absorb it and utilize it isn't as good as when we were younger. So it's kind of a catch-22 again. Like the sleep thing you brought up. We need more, but it's hard to stay asleep.
Yeah. It is the again, I grew up in the era where protein, throughout my entire life, protein is the answer to all questions. And now I'm at an age where actually, if you do the research, I do need to assimilate more protein. So the best thing I can tell you about nutrition, at least the way it's worked for me, and I nod to Lyle McDonald here, is you have to start thinking cyclical somehow. Now, I always have, here in the States, it's pretty easy. In the fall, it's harvest time in the States. That's the time of year. Apples are great. That's the time of year. Lots and lots of squashes, pumpkins. The winter is a good time to eat up all your stored food. That's a good time to eat. I'm a big soup maker. I have a slow cooker. I do a lot of pot meals. A stew pot. We let the food, the root vegetables and the meat spend 8 hours together. In the spring, as you start to slide out, the tradition then is the Lent to, the Carnival, which is the feast of eating meat, literally. And then you give up meat for a while. I think in the spring, it's a good time to lighten up. And of course, summer is the summer fruits, the berries and things. That right there, I just gave you a traditional yearly approach to cyclical eating. Lyle has this thing called CKD, cyclical ketogenic dieting, where you go 0 carbs for 5 days in a row and then carb up. Now, I've never found a better diet for throwers. And you want to compete on the last day of 0 carbs because you're a total asshole. You're a total effing asshole. Awful. Oh my God, they're terrible. Then after the meat, you have some beer and some cheese pizza, and everybody loves everybody. Okay, everybody happy again. Not a good way. Not a good way to be a thrower is when you're happy. You want to always be kind of pissed off about something. I'm discovering with the longevity diet by, and I mentioned him earlier, Walter Longo. He really pushes pescatarian, the fish-based diet. But I can tell you this from my experiences in Europe. If you're an EU country, you're probably doing better than any American will ever do. And there's a specific one, I think. Well, there's 2. Norway and Ireland, I think about the most. I love when I'm in Galway. Where are you right now, Robbie? Where?
I'm in Dublin right now.
Oh, you're in Dublin, huh? It's almost like Ireland there, isn't it? London is the only place I've ever been in my life where I could not find a single person who spoke English. And Dublin's turning into that too, isn't it?
Hey, we're getting multicultural.
A little bit, yeah. But when I'm in Galway, one day I asked where the mussels came from, and the girl looked at me funny, and she went, "Well, it was Galway Bay." She pointed to the little place where they. Yeah. So when
out the window, she's like, "There."
Right there, see the bay right there. Did you miss that? I'm walking over here, sir. I'm sorry, but the fish is fresh caught. The eggs are orange. The Kerrygold butter is orange. The meat is amazing. Tiff and I, both of us note at the end of our month, we spend a month there every year, at the end of our month there, we feel better. Yeah. We just feel better, which is why England's decision to leave the EU makes no sense to me at all. Because the health of the typical English person is going the direction of America, which is not a good direction. But I would say, if you can, focusing on the quality of food is much more important after 22 than the quantity of food. Now, remember, here in the States, the federal government, soy, wheat, milk, and something.
Corn,
thank you. Geez, the obvious one, are all subsidized. So they're extremely inexpensive. So you'll find those 4 ingredients in literally everything. And it'll be very inexpensive to buy those things. But is soy, corn, wheat, milk the best thing for you? Now, this is a conversation for nutritionists. but from my observations of walking around America, and of course the sugar industry has such a hold on the Congress, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I would say if we on the food issue, if you don't mind me focusing on the quality of the food and kind of stepping away from the quantity so much.
And just with yourself, like say in terms of the composition of proteins, fats, and carbs, have you found over the years, like when you sit down to a meal now, maybe when you were in your 20s, there was more portion of protein there, say maybe to the other macros, but now you're maybe going a bit more towards more easily digestible fats or carbs, or do you still eat quite a lot of protein?
I still stick with what I was told.
Yeah.
Olympic Training Center, 1984.
Yeah.
Vegetables, protein, and water. I mean, that's
the old classic.
Yeah. My dinner tonight, in fact, it's sitting right over there, is a massive bowl of 3 different kinds of peppers. Yellow, orange, red, onions, and 2 other vegetables, and then I'm going to make chicken thighs.
Nice.
So that's dinner tonight. So, and that's a very common meal for me. After my workout this morning, I'll probably have there's a place I go to after my workout sometimes. I'll get a Greek salad and.
Is that the diner where the woman found out you're famous? Because someone went, "You're Dan John," and then the next day she's like, "You're famous, Dan."
Yeah, that's landmark. But yeah, that's it. This is another one. This is one. So Greek restaurants in Utah are where you want to eat. So that's the Greek restaurant this way. This is the Greek restaurant that way, closer to my gym.
Great.
But, by the time I get done with lunch, I'll have consumed 13, 14 vegetables with my choices at this place, different vegetables. For me, I'm still a believer that it's veggies. Now, when you talk about fats in this house, we are big fans of the avocado and good butter. So we import to my home. I buy Kerrygold butter. I don't get any money for this. I buy Kerrygold butter by the case, and then we freeze it. So we have 2 cases down our downstairs freezer.
You can't get it in the supermarkets there, no? Because when I was in Arizona, Boston, the supermarkets always had it.
Yeah, they can, but it's $5 a cube. Where if I buy,
it actually is. Yeah, that was one thing I was going to say. It is expensive.
Yeah, but here's the deal. My brother died just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that having the death of a sibling does make you do is think not only about health and performance, but also about longevity. So, I mean, if I know that these partially hydrogenated fats, like they take corn and turn into margarine, they take this and turn it into that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want that in my pumping through my veins.
Oh yeah, I know that.
And the other thing I really think you need to do in nutrition is the opposite of what we're talking about. I do think you need to not eat. A lot of people I work with have discovered it's so hard to get an American to fast because we're so taught to just constantly consume. There's a great story in the book, Spring Chicken, about this man who would go to 2 different fast food restaurants before he went home to eat dinner because he was so starving so much. Hey, you laugh, but I know these people. I work with these people. I work with 2 women who've lost 100 pounds in less than a year. And the hardest thing for them to do is tell their body, you're fine. You're not starving. They have massive thirst. They're always thirsty. And they're drinking soft drinks to curb the thirst because the soft drinks have that sugar in them and it just gets that engine going more and more and more. So one of the things about fasting, either a traditional fast where you don't eat, or more like a Ramadan fast where you don't eat from sun up to sundown, what we would call the intermittent fasting, or even there's a new diet out called the snake diet where you go 22 hours without eating and then 2 hours, a 2-hour. The warrior diet was 20 hours and then 4-hour refeed. This is 22 hours and a 2-hour refeed. Or like what I do with the fast mimicking diet, 5 days a month, where I go 800 calories. Folks, I'm not telling you to do any of this. I'm just saying that's what I do.
Yeah.
800 calories for 4 or 5 days. But the nice thing after that, it just retames the monster.
Yeah.
And remember, your appetites, and there's nothing new here. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle told us the same thing.
Yeah.
our appetites, we have to be like a charioteer. We have to hold them back. And the easiest way I know how to hold back the appetites is to stop.
Mm.
And
A lot of it, a lot of our eating habits are just because of society. Like, in terms of, like, I remember, like, I can't remember I heard it, but, like, when you were young and your mother, like, you can't be going to school without a breakfast. You have to eat a breakfast. So, like, in your head, you're like, oh, I have to eat breakfast. When your body is telling you, I don't really want breakfast today, and we kind of, like, don't listen to the body. And we usually just eat out of habit to, oh, it's lunchtime, so it's time to have lunch. It's like, are you hungry? And you're like, not really.
true.
And then the other thing too is another big thing that's coming out now, Dan, is the timing of our meal seems to be really important. So, a lot of this research coming out from, like, Sachin Patel and time restricted feeding, it's kind of shown that eating the majority of your calories later in the day is not as good for your body from a health longevity standpoint.
The 2 o'clock stop.
Yeah, if you so they're saying that it seems to be much more beneficial to eat the majority of your calories earlier on in the day, when you're in your quote unquote what's called your active period, which is basically daylight. They just say, like, the daylight period, because again the metabolic machinery in the body, it fluctuates throughout the day. Like, so I'll let you speak now in just a sec. But what Sachin Panda's kind of getting at is that, like, you metabolically, you're more wired to efficiently more metabolize your food earlier in the day, like, so midday, kind of early afternoon, then at night. But he says most people, and even if they are intermittent fasting, what do? They usually have something small in the day, and they backlog all their calories to dinner at night, because again, it's a social thing, it's a society thing, because most of us now have dinners at 7 or 8 p.m. or we're going out for dinner. And he's like, most people just backlog, and he's like, then you have a huge feast, and then they go to bed then, and they're not actually giving their digestive system time to actually repair when they're asleep then, because they've all the food in their stomach. So it's not even what you eat, it seems to be the timing of what you eat too.
Well, there's this new thing out that you shouldn't eat after 2 p.m. It's this new that's not going to happen. But what is interesting is that I listened to this very good woman who talked about female hormones, and she said, naturally, if you don't want to inject, if you don't want to get hormonal therapy, she said, if you just would go to bed 2 hours after sundown, always, and when you wake up in the morning, move. And she goes, never use your snooze. Never snooze. Never snooze. Snoozing tells your brain that you didn't get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Even if you did. But from a hormonal state, what's fascinating to me on this is that if these two people, if you combine them, if you stop eating at 2 p.m. and you go to bed 2 hours after dinner, you've had an 8-hour window to fully digest your food. And then you fast through the night, and it brings us right back to the 16-8 intermittent fasting. Now, we have to be careful here. And as a good Irish boy, you should understand this. There's a massive difference between fasting, hunger, and starvation. And one of the things I always tell people is, like, I live in this country that can't understand hunger versus starvation. And there's parts of the world where people starve. And in the United States, we have we have anti-starvation going on. We have the exact opposite of starvation. And that's one of the things I always want to bring up to people, is that when they first mention fasting to them, it is fascinating to watch the bells ring in their head. Whoa, 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 not eat? That's when someone has been programmed, literally programmed by commercials and life, that we have I have some godchildren come over here. We never have dessert here, and when they eat with us, they always say, well, is there a dessert? We always say, well, no, we don't. We always have dessert. Well,
you can have more vegetables.
Yeah, here's another piece of chicken, but to them, you eat dinner and then there's dessert. There are many kids in America that if they turn their homework in, they should get a treat. Birthday cake, wedding cake. It's always that we've tied celebrations into food, so that to make people feel better, very often they'll find what we call comfort foods.
Yeah.
And most people discover that eating when things are going down isn't really a good solution.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier on, it's habit, and it's emotional too. So Like, I mean, it can become an addiction like any other addiction, whether, like, when you say addiction to most people, they immediately think, you know, drugs and alcohol. But like food is an addiction for some people, and it's a comfort thing. Like, so like people who are addicted to food, you know, generally, well, you can have people, I was going to say generally they're overweight. You can have people who actually are they're not
Oh yeah,
actually, they're not,
bulimia,
yeah,
anorexia.
bulimia, anorexia. But it's a coping mechanism, in that, like, you know, a piece of cake or the food, like the food is always there. You know what it's going to taste like if it's a food that you always eat. So there's a certainty element in that. And then the food never wants anything back from you. It never looks at you and judges you and says you're a worthless piece of shit. Like, so you don't have to give anything. Like, it's a very easy exchange, you know. So and it gives you, like, obviously that emotional input that you need. So it's the same then with people on drugs and alcohol, or if you've an addiction, like people who have addictions to cleaning, like OCD, you know, sexual addictions, like stuff like that. Usually an addiction is to something that, again, it's certain. You know what you're getting every time with it. And again, you don't have to, like, there's no, as I said there, there's no judgment from what you're from what you're using as your coping mechanism. So again, like with cigarettes, the cigarette doesn't turn around to the smoker and go, "You're worthless." It's like, you know, it's so basically there's safe things to love, like alcohol. The point of Guinness, it tastes the same, it's there every time. You know what I mean? But what happens is you get desensitized to the reward in your brain, so you need more and more of it. That's the only thing from a biochemical standpoint. So I think a lot of the food too, like when you say to people fast, it's probably sometimes it's maybe not so much that, like, what, not eat? Because you could say to them, listen, haven't you slept for 10 hours before a day? You went 10 hours without food, you were fine. But it's more so like, in their head, they're like, but I love eating. You know, in their head, like, but I love the taste of that. Like, I need it. You know, they mightn't say that consciously, but it's subconsciously the emotional part. That's probably why fasting is so, you know, at first I'm like, I couldn't go without eating. I need my food to cope. Like, it's an emotional thing, as you said.
One of my teammates at RKC2 was a guy named Dr. McCombs, who specializes in the yeast infections. Okay. And he goes, here's the strangest thing. I have seen through my career that orange juice and oranges tend to cause many women to have the yeast problem. Now we've calmed it down, doing all that with drugs, with some interventions, and then I'll just say, you know, you probably want to not drink orange juice or eat oranges. And almost universally, women throw their hands on the table and go, I love oranges. I can't give up oranges. Or I love oranges. And, well, when's the last time you had one? I don't know, 10 years ago. Telling someone they can't have orange juice or oranges makes them crave orange juice or oranges.
Yeah.
And that was a real insight for me as a coach, because that's the way people think. My only thing I was going to toss in while you were talking is, you know, in my system, when we coach people, everything's habits. So, for example, athletes have checklists that we type them up, we laminate them, we hook them to their gym bag, so that when they go to competition, they have to go through a checklist. On my computer right behind here, I have my daily pirate map of the things I do, like meditate and eat vegetables. And one of the things I try to do with people is that get them to realize that generally what they do is most of their eating is not even at a conscious level. It is literally a habit.
Yeah.
When I walk into this room, I open this door. Inside this door is food. I reach in and I grab something, because that's what you do in this room called the kitchen. Over there is where the TV is. When I sit down, I have to have a bowl in front of me of something. So I'm going to go get myself a bowl of, you guys call them crisps. I'm going to get a bowl of crisps. Chips for those who are American. And one of the easy, hard things to do when you coach people, I think it's when people suddenly go, oh my God, I don't even know why I do that. You know, there's an old comedian who used to make the joke about, what is it about stoplights that makes people pick their nose? You know, you pull up the stoplight, look around, you see people picking their nose. Some women pluck their eyebrows at stoplights. What is it? You have certain things that you do and you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And you have to learn that is a habit. And because it's a habit, it's very easy to break. Once you know that it's literally thoughtless. It's like when I wake up in the morning and open my computer and go to my email. I don't think for the first 2 hours of my day. I hate to call it thoughtless because but much of the work I do first thing in the morning is it's grind. It's like doing one arm presses. It's just one,
Mm-hmm.
two. I'm not thinking, I'm just grinding them out.
Yeah, that's
And
why
that's why,
you got to make sure that the habits you set up are beneficial ones rather than detrimental ones. So
that's
important.
why it's so important to have checklists and to have a pirate map. In fact, I'm adding to my pirate map. I'm getting rid of a few things and I'm adding some afternoon things to make me think more creatively again.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to show this, but here's my daily, that's my $1 million checklist every day.
I love the fancy notebook too. Just a basic spiral notebook. I love it. You ever get these people who spend like, $20, $30, $40, $50 on a notebook, and like, you can just get one for $1. Rather be a euro over here.
Actually, I used to just use those little, do you know those little index cards?
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the best ones because I put it in my pocket. And what I would do to it, because I work at home now, this is when I was an administrator, I traveled, is I would work on it and I would write down, call Robbie, 801-525-2299. And I'd write it down and I'd put it in my pocket, and either with my early cell phone or when I stopped, I'd put a quarter in the thing and dial you up. And since I don't need to do that, so I work at home now, but I used to I would have this little folded index card every day in there, and it would have, write a thank you note to, get a, birthday card for it, it would be all the family life stuff and then the work stuff. And the work stuff might be drive to St. George, give 2-hour talk. Okay. But the thing is, when I work with people, the concept we use, folks, is called the pirate map. I probably went through this with Robbie in the past. Kind of real quick to the two terms. Do you mind?
The pirate map. Oh yeah, fire ahead, yeah.
Okay, so the first term is called a shark habit, and that's one bite and it's gone. And
shark habit, yeah.
Most people notice I almost always wear a black polo shirt. And they're all the same because I bought 16 of them. And the reason I bought 16 is that's all they had in North America. So I bought literally every single one. I wear the exact same pair of pants. I have the exact same shoes. I have the exact same socks. I do got a little fancy with my underwear. Okay, I wear a Snugs brand. I don't know, whatever it is. But I don't think there's most of my life. When you said you want to talk, I said yes. Right now we had some things come up that changed, but I apologize. But you email me. You ask me yes, no, yes, no. When my mail comes, yes, no. If it's a check, I fill out the check. Done. I don't think a lot. That's what a pirate map is. That's what a shark habit is. A pirate map is a daily, a pirate map. Go to St. John's Island, find the white coconut tree, take 6 paces to the west, dig down, there's your treasure. Before I go to bed, I make coffee. What makes, and it did again this morning, what wakes me up in the morning is the smell of coffee. I make my to-do list before I go to bed. Sometimes I did that last night. Last night, I did a couple of things on my to-do list already, so it was already done before I even got up. The first thing I do, and I'm going to change this one, I wake up and I try to be grateful for something. I do a 1-minute meditation. I train 3 days a week at Epic Fitness. I train 2 days a week here at my gym, and I strive to eat 10 different vegetables every day. That's my pirate map. If I do that day in, day out, over the next 10 years, I am pushing myself to better longevity and better performance in all areas of life. None of it's fancy, folks, and it's very simple. But when I haven't eaten since I ate last night at 5 or 4:30, and I haven't eaten, I'm gonna go work out. But when I do go to eat, what I'll be looking for is vegetables, because that's always what I look for in a meal, vegetables. And what a pirate map does for you is that it's your daily habits that if you follow those, good things will happen long term.
Yeah, they're heuristics to live by.
Yes, exactly. And I always tell people I can tell what their workout is when they walk in the gym, I'll just watch for 10 minutes and I'll have an absolutely correct insight about how they train. If they spend 5 minutes, pinging on their phone and getting their earbuds in a certain way to get their song, I know they're not training very hard. When you see me train, back in the past, my first exercise was always front squats. Because, man, if something happened and I had to go in and take care of my daughters or mow the lawn or some emergency happened, if I got my front squats in, I knew I'd still remain an elite athlete.
Yeah.
Next were loaded carries. If I got my front squats and my loaded carries done, I'd still remain an elite athlete. Front squats, loaded carries, and then do the Olympic lifts. I know I'm better than everybody else. So it's just habits.
Yeah.
And it's how you arrange them. And for me, the pirate map is that daily habit, that umbrella habit that overhangs everything else. If I do those things, and I do every single day, good things happen downstream.
Is that something that's changed over your career too, that you become more organized?
Yes. Well, I had to meet other people and talk to people about it, get smarter about certain things.
Yeah.
I talk to my athletes, and I'm still in touch. Most of my athletes in the late 80s and 90s are lawyers, doctors, and professors. I'm very happy with that. And I'll talk to them. I'll send them copies of my books, and like especially this last one, because I mentioned a lot of them specifically, and they'll laugh and go, all these things you're talking about in your new books, you were doing in the 90s. You just didn't call it that. You didn't call it those things.
Yeah.
So we were always on the right track, but clarity is always the key, Robbie. You can be the best coach in the world, but if you can't explain it, you suck.
Yeah.
If you got a great nutrition program, but you can't sell it, you don't have a nutrition program.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly looking for a better way to explain and get things across to my people.
Yeah, communication is key. Actually, there's a book there I read this year, Made to Stick, by the Heat brothers, and it's all about how to put a message out there. And they give some great examples in that of they take someone trying to communicate a message and they say, this is how they done it. And then they say, this is how we would have done it. And you can see, yeah, okay, your example is way better in making it stick in people's minds,
Making it stick, huh? Making it stick.
No, it's called Made to Stick. Made to Stick. It's very, you're a reader. You'd read it in few hours. Very easy book.
The authors' names are
Chip and Dan Heath. Chip and Dan Heath. Made to Stick.
How do I know them?
They have a book called Switch.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, just so you know, that's called Made to Stick, because there's another book called Make It Stick, and that's a different book. That book's about memory and recall. Make It Stick. That's also another good book. But Made to Stick.
Oh, by the way, it'll interest you and your listeners to know that you can't copyright a title of a book.
Oh, did not know that.
Yeah. So my next book is Macbeth, and it's about weightlifting.
My next book then is Never Let Go.
Ah, you bastard.
Come here, I won't keep you much longer. Two last things, and you can take as much time with it as you want. Mobility, we haven't really touched on that. How has, just the maintenance of your body changed with your training over? Do you spend a longer time mobility? Do you just do more mobility sets throughout the week? Has it changed at all?
Yeah. Well, the one thing is, I think you have to be clear on what you need. For example, with me, with my surgeries in my lifetime, wrist and finger mobility are something I just really keep an eye on because I've had serious surgeries on my wrist and both fingers. I've lost, basically I shouldn't have my pinky fingers, but that's a story for another time. My shoulder mobility, I have discovered 99% of the crap I've done in my career has no value at all. I just hang. And it's hanging from a pull-up bar does more for my shoulder mobility than all the nonsense I've done in my entire career. For hip mobility, this will shock no one, but sitting in the deep goblet squat or goblet squatting followed by prowlers does more for my hip mobility than all the nonsense most people do. And then feet and ankle mobility are something I worry about because I've spent a lifetime in hard shoes. Okay. Yeah. And so I kind of wish I'd have done a little bit more stuff barefoot in my life, but I was pretty good about it. So for me, I do believe in full body joint stuff. I think it has great value. On Thursdays, if you come to my gym every Thursday, most popular day of the week to train, it's Tonic Thursday. It's 1 hour of basically joint mobility work.
Thursday's that's my day too. Currently in my weekly schedule, the day I was going to do. It's like my light, kind of a lot of mobility, body weight.
So we do everything. We do the wrists, we do the fingers, we do the toes, we do the ankles. A lot of hip work, a lot of shoulder, a lot of back, a lot of T-spine, the whole bit. But I also sprinkle a little bit in every day with what Tim Anderson calls original strength.
Mm-hmm.
So that I would push people to Tim's work. For me and for most of the athletes I've ever worked with, sometimes you'll be around reading mobility stuff and it's like, I don't have the 12 hours a day to do it. Or I can't sell what I'm reading here.
Yeah.
But I can sell original strength. And I've been able to sell original strength for at least a decade. There's a little bit of American Irish coming out there.
I think also too, it's going to be specific to the person. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, more people have, some people might need more T-spine work versus hip mobility work versus ankle mobility work. And
one of the things we're finding, Robbie, is that you got to be real careful on what you say is stiff or what you say is immobile.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you've got toes that aren't doing their work, the toe bone is connected to the foot bone. The foot bone's connected, you're complaining about your T-spine mobility, but it really could be the fact that you jammed your big toe into a wall the other night, or something as simple as what you thought was T-spine could just simply be the fact that your shoulders are locked up and you need to hang for a little bit. Yeah. So that's one of the things we're discovering now. There's no science behind it. This is just observations and feedback. Is that we always try to say, be a little careful before you judge what's stiff or tight. Give it 20 minutes on Thursday before you decide what's stiff or tight. Because it's funny, because what I think is stiff turns out to be something completely in a different direction.
Yeah. Have you come across any of Andrew Spina's work, the functional range conditioning? FRC. You've probably heard of it, but I don't know if you've heard.
I don't know much about it.
Yeah, I think I'm not. I took it and I think you'd really like it. So basically, it's just so his whole thing is most mobility that people do. One, that it's really general. They just do it because I think I need to mobilize my T-spine hips, and he's most of it is just passive in that you'll do a stretch and he's but it won't maintain. So a lot of his thing is he'll get you into a position and he does these things called pails and rails. It's essentially doing contractions to either side of the joint so that you get strong in that range. So the end range of the stretch. So a 1990 hips. It's not really. It's not.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So some people call it the pigeon stretch, but it's not from yoga. But it's for your external hip rotators. Well, he'll contract either side of the joint and. When I did his course, and it's really you got to really contract, he has other things called control articular rotations, bringing the joints through full range of motion, but being strict. So if you were doing circles with your shoulder, your neck and all shouldn't move, but everyone's neck moves because we're so
for it.
Yeah, your head moves and all. But I'll tell you, the weekend, that weekend after the Sunday when we finished his 2-day seminar, I felt incredible. Do you know what I mean? Obviously it was a new input and stimulus to the system. So obviously it was going to be, do you know what I mean? But I really did his kind of thing that, he was treating mobility like strength in that he's you need to have progressive overload to see a benefit. He's so by the contractions going either side and stuff like that, and you need to stay on top of it and just being strong in certain end ranges as well. Cause so, and he's if you're not strong, you start cramping. So when we were doing that stretch for our quad, so you bring your heel to your butt. He was right now, try and contract your hamstring in that position. Everyone cramps. And he's because you're not strong. You're not, your knee joint in that fully flexed position isn't strong enough. So he's so if you're trying to mobilize your hip and knee in that position and you just passively do it won't. You're basically 2 minutes later it's gone. Whereas if you do the contraction either side to contract, relax, you're telling your brain nervous system, I need to hang on to this. It's just basically kind of the Gray Cook's thing of mobilize and then make sure you put some motor control over that mobilized joint so it becomes integrated with the system. But it's just what I found at FRC it was just more specific, more to the point and quicker. And I just think that because you love knowing more stuff, so I think you find benefit in FRC. I think it'd be something if you don't mind. I like it.
Pavel Tsatsouline had that great book back in just after the millennium, Relax and Stretch.
Similar, yeah, contracting, yeah.
The clasp knife technique, I think he called it. And here's the thing: there's nothing new under the sun.
No, and by the way, Spina wouldn't be I invented this. He just put it into a much more better, systematic way of thinking. That's all. It's not. I'm not saying it's brand new.
Oh no. I'm just saying that, and that's the biggest problem most people make is they don't oh my God, I'll read these books, Robbie, and I'll be like, okay, good. Now it's more information. Where does it fit?
Yeah, what to do with it now? Yeah,
Okay, so
exactly.
I've got this, you're going to have me do these 35 hours a week of this. Where do I put that in? Well, that's why I try real hard, like, my matrix where, you know, if I bring an exercise in, it means I have to throw one out.
Mm. Mm.
Now, sometimes I don't want to throw that exercise out. So, but so what? No one cares. All right, last question.
Last question was stress management. So you kind of mentioned it there a little bit that you're doing some more meditation. Just obviously as it probably is maybe, I don't know. You can answer this now. Is it a bit like a circle? We're young and we don't give a crap, and then we're in that middle age where now kids and wife and mortgage, and then like you get to the other side of the hill where kids are gone and I'm kind of don't give a shit anymore. So
Exactly
how does the stress management go across the career of the
Well,
age?
it's exactly where I'm at. One thing I've discovered in my life. Now, this is up to you. This might, and gentle listener, you'll have to take this. But for me, my stress management has always been uh, checklists, menus, pirate maps. If I have a lot of things stressing me, I write down what's stressing me, and then when I see it on black and white, oh, and okay, if I have one, like I used to do this thing called Congress, it was 1,500 people, I was in charge, 1,500 people, 3-day event, and it would stress me out. And I'd write down Congress, and then I'd write down what is stressing you out. Well, the fact that 1,500 people are coming, that wasn't a stressor. The fact that I needed toilet paper for 1,500 people, now, okay, that's something I gotta work. And so what I would do is I'd write down the underlying thing. 5, 6 phone calls later, I'd look at that list again and be like, okay, so what's stressing you out about this? Oh, the fact that there is an event coming up in 6 months. Are you going to sit? And then it would just wash off of me. So for me, stress management very often is, I don't know if you've ever heard whether it's true or not, but 80% of your worries are stuff that's in the past you can't change. 15% of the worries are things you can't change. 5% of your worries are things you can actually change. So focus on that 5%. Stress, and by the way, there is good stress. It's called eustress, as in Eucharist, good stress, and distress. And the truth is, the body responds to both about the same. So I just try to flood myself with as much eustress as I possibly can. Yes, meditation does help, but I use meditation to actually make myself a better writer, grandfather, husband, dad, neighbor. And I also use meditation to help me fall asleep very fast now on planes. Last week I had a 9-hour delay on my flight. 9 hours. Well, they had us on the tarmac for 2 in the beginning. I woke up 2-hour delayed flight, and I turned to the person next to me and go, "Are we here?" And she goes, "We haven't left yet." "We haven't left yet." And I went, "Oh, is there a problem?" "Yes, it's a 2-hour delay." "Oh." Because for me, it was a 2-hour nap. So, and I use brain.fm
Nice.
for those. And then for my 1-minute meditations, it's an app called 1 Moment Meditation.
Nice.
But I'm a strong believer. The 1 Moment is free. Brain FM, there is a charge, but I know there's a free version of it. And I find it really helpful. When I'm really in there is one called Focus, and then when I'm cranking out a book, I'll have Focus on for 4 hours at a time.
Wow.
It's just chung, 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 and it knocks out all the sounds. It knocks out, and I am the phrase when you work with hawks, the phrase is yerk, and yerk is the phrase when a hawk hasn't eaten, and its eyes are like, well, I'm in total yerk when I write books with that stuff on.
Yeah, they call it in the zone.
Well, yeah. Well, it's in the zone by making myself in the zone.
I know what you mean. Yeah. All right, Coach Hanson, that's been a fantastic over an hour conversation. I really appreciate your time. Where can the listeners find out more about you and what you got going on?
Well, danjohn.net is my website. It's mostly just a holder for thousands of free pages of information. My Instagram is Coach Dan John, and just you guys are welcome to email me anytime you want, dan@danjohn.net. Okay?
Great stuff. So for everyone listening, thanks so much. Peace.
Peace out. Thanks for everything, my friend.